Hi folks, I hope you're all keeping well. A little bit of an update just on the basis of phone calls I'm starting to receive now. We're talking about possible green shoots and looking at moving back into the workplace in the next few weeks. The queries I'm getting more than any now are about redundancy and options for that. So I just thought it'd be timely just to run through these, just to kind of refresh them in your mind a little bit. Firstly, obviously, redundancy is one of the legal ways of dismissing somebody from your employment, often used to reduce your workforce. And obviously, at times like this, when we are looking at the uncertainty of what's happening going forward, they're on people's minds at the moment. What I would say is don't rush too soon into redundancy, because as long as the government are paying the furlough, it's no cost to you at all. As soon as you start looking at redundancy, it starts to become a cost for you, which you might not actually need yet. Bear in mind that people have not been able to go out and spend money. Bear in mind that they've not been using their cars, and bearing in mind that they've still been getting paid at least 80% salary. This potentially isn't the great financial crisis it could be, but we don't know. So very quickly running through what redundancy is about. Redundancy pay is paid for up to 20 years of service. Notice periods are up to 12 weeks of service. People are entitled to consultation with their employer before being made redundant. They're also entitled to be able to be considered for options to move into another job and given time off to find a new job. Now, if you're selected for redundancy, it's got to be based on a selection criteria if there's more than one of you in a post. If you're an individual in a post, then obviously you can select that, and so long as you've got a business case to justify why that post is being selected, then that's fine. If, however, you've got more than one person in a post, you've got to have an objective criteria to select one person over the other. So those things are commonly used as asking for volunteers, paying voluntary redundancy. The downside to that is you may get somebody who wants to come forward, who's got a lot of knowledge, skills, experience and time served, and you want to keep them, and obviously then you're going to have to turn them down on that. You could look at disciplinary records, absence records, performance, staff appraisals, skills, qualifications and experience. So the reasons why we say to you, you should be doing appraisals and keeping records, this is why they become very, very important. A common question we're asked is, well, we'll just let them go, last in, first out, or everyone under 2 years service. We understand the reason for that, but it is actually fraught with danger, because last in, first out, if it's selected just on its own, can be considered to be age discrimination. So you would have to put that in with some other criteria at the same time. But you are correct in your thought pattern that under 2 years service you are not entitled to redundancy pay, and that's why people go for that. What I would start off with is people that are on the probation, because you don't have to refer to the capability process, you don't have to refer to disciplinary. You can just unfortunately end their employment with you, and then maybe put last in, first out as part of the criteria. So in terms of redundancy pay, just to give you an idea of what that is at the moment, once you've got 2 years service, you are entitled to pay, and it actually is backdated from your very first day. So literally you get 2 years and 1 day service, you're entitled to 2 years of redundancy pay. If you've got 1 day short of it, you're entitled to nothing. So for an under 22-year-old, it's £269 for every week that they've worked, every year that they've worked for you. If it's somebody who is aged between 22 it's £538 for every year that they've worked for you. And for those of us that are over 41, the only benefit to getting older is the fact that you get paid £807 for every year that you've worked there from being 41 on above. So if you work for a company for 10 years and you're 43 years old, you'd have a number of years at the lower rate and a few years at the higher rate. I always suggest going on the government calculator to look at what your liabilities are, because it does all the work for you and explains to you exactly how much money it's going to cost. Now, in terms of consultation process you'll need to go through, if it's more than 20 people, you've got to consult for over 30 days. If it's 100 or more, it's 45 days. So for most of you out there, we're going to be talking about less than 20 people, in which case there's no specific length of time where you've got to consult for. Now, what you have to do is do a meaningful consultation. So the steps are basically an at-risk meeting, which is where you bring people together, explain what the situation is, and effectively inform them that they are at risk of redundancy. Following that, you then have your first consultation meeting where you're talking to them about their individual circumstances, explaining to them in more detail about why their role's been selected, and starting to discuss any other options, whether they can be transferred to another role or not. If they are in a position where they're in a shared role, this is the first time you're starting to talk to them about the criteria. So you'd have to put in front of them a criteria that you're suggesting would be useful for selection and fair. They are then able to go away and think about this and come back to you at the next consultation meeting to discuss this. And you can have one or two of these until you iron out what the actual selection process is. Typically, that's decided on the second or possibly the third consultation meeting. So the meetings go on basically, I normally suggest at least 2 consultation meetings and an at risk, because at least then you've had time to meaningfully discuss the options, make sure that both sides are satisfied that there isn't anything else that you can do to save their role, and at that point where really the discussion is exhausted, then you can give notice. Now basically it's 1 week's notice for every year that they worked for you. So if they work for you for 12 years, it's 12 months notice pay. If they work for you for 15, it's still 12, because it's capped at 12 weeks. And obviously the redundancy works in the same way, but that mounts up to a maximum of 20 years. So this is why I say redundancy is quite an expensive process to go through. It's going to take you probably about a week and a half to go through the process, maybe a little bit more if you've got less than 20 people. But as I say, if you can keep your nerve until you know what's happening with potential client base at the end of the furlough process, I would strongly advise you to do that. But you know where we are. If you need to start to discussing these things, please give us a shout, but I hope that gave you a reasonable overview of the redundancy process.